All right, so when an economy is in trouble, I mean, really taking a nosedive, how do you stop the bleeding? It's kind of like economic first aid, right? But the thing is, there are two totally different first aid kits you can reach for. So let's break down these two competing ideas.
Okay, so picture this. The news is just awful. Markets are in a free fall, and you can feel the panic setting in. This isn't just some textbook exercise, you know? This is the real, urgent question that policymakers have to answer when a recession hits. So what do? Do you jump in and try to steer the ship, or do you, I don't know, trust the system to fix itself?
And believe me, the stakes here are just incredibly high. I mean, think back to the Great Recession. We saw this exact scenario play out in real time. We're talking trillions with a T, trillions of dollars just vanishing from the stock market. And when that happens, people, they get scared. They stop buying stuff. And what happens next? Well, companies have to start cutting jobs. The whole economic engine of the country just starts sputtering, falling way, way short of what it could be doing.
So that brings us to our first theory, the first playbook, if you will. It's the Keynesian response, named after the famous economist John Maynard Keynes. And when faced with a crisis like this, his school of thought basically shouts one thing: intervene. The mantra is, don't just stand there, do something.
So what's the core idea here? Well, the Keynesian argument is pretty straightforward. The government has a huge role to play as a stabilizing force. They look at a recession and say, look, the main problem here is what we call aggregate demand. And that's really just a fancy way of saying the total amount of spending in the economy. If everyday people and businesses aren't spending enough, well, the government needs to step in and fill that gap.
And I love this analogy, it just makes so much sense. Think of the government's main tools, we're talking taxes and spending, as a gas pedal and a brake for the entire economy. So if you're stuck in a recession with high unemployment, what do? You step on the gas. You cut taxes, maybe send out stimulus checks, anything to get more money into people's pockets. Or the government can start spending more on big projects like infrastructure to create jobs directly. On the flip side, if the economy is running too hot and inflation is a problem, you hit the brakes. That means you might raise taxes or cut spending to cool things down.
Okay, so here's a really crucial point. It's all about the time scale. Keynesians are laser-focused on the short term, the here and now. They argue that in the real world, things like wages and prices, they don't just magically adjust downward overnight when a recession hits. They're what economists call sticky. A worker who just got laid off isn't going to immediately take a new job for half their old salary. And because of that stickiness, unemployment can drag on for a long, painful time unless the government steps in to jolt the system.
But what if the best thing to do is nothing at all? What if the best intervention is no intervention? Well, that brings us to the complete opposite perspective, the neoclassical view. They look at the very same crisis and come to a pretty radical conclusion. Let the economy fix itself.
And they have this brilliant analogy for it. They say focusing on a recession is like obsessing over a single nasty blizzard in Chicago. Yeah, it's dramatic, it's messy, it caused a lot of problems in the short term, but does that one blizzard really tell you about Chicago's overall climate? Not really. To understand the economy, they argue, you have to ignore the short-term storms and look at the long-term patterns, the overall climate.
And the anchor for this entire way of thinking is a concept called potential GDP. Now, this isn't about the economy's output on any random Tuesday. It's about the maximum sustainable output the economy can churn out when everything is running smoothly, when all our resources are being used efficiently. When pretty much everyone who wants a job has one. For neoclassical economists, this is the economy's true north. It's where the system naturally wants to be.
So you're probably asking, okay, how does the economy get back there all by itself? Well, they see it as this kind of natural chain reaction. Step 1, a recession hits and sadly unemployment goes up. Step 2, with more people looking for fewer jobs, there's a downward pressure on wages. They might not fall, but they'll stop growing. Step 3, because labor is now cheaper, it costs less for businesses to hire people and make stuff. And this is the key part. That lets them boost the overall supply of goods and services in the economy. And then boom, the system naturally finds its way back to that potential GDP, back to full employment.
And this leads directly to their number one piece of policy advice. They're basically saying, don't mess around trying to fine-tune the economy. Fighting these short-term recessions, in their view, is a fool's errand. They think government intervention usually comes too late anyway and can actually make things worse. So instead, they say, focus on the big picture. Focus on policies that will boost that potential GDP in the long run, things like promoting investment or keeping taxes and regulations low to encourage growth.
Okay, so we've got two very different ways of looking at the same problem with two very different solutions. Let's put them side by side and really dig into where they disagree.
This chart really lays it all out, doesn't it? On one side, you have the neoclassical school, totally focused on the long term. They believe prices and wages are flexible and that everything is driven by the supply side of the economy. Their goal? Promote that long-term growth. Then you have the Keynesians. They're all about the short term. They see prices and wages as sticky and believe that the economy is driven by demand. So their goal is completely different. It's about fighting that painful cyclical unemployment right now.
And this clash in view world is captured perfectly by something called the Phillips curve. It's basically this idea that there's a relationship between inflation and unemployment. From the Keynesian perspective, at least in the short run, there's a trade-off. You can kind of choose. If you're willing to accept a little bit more inflation, you can get unemployment down. But the neoclassical camp looks at that and says, nope, not in the long run. They argue that any attempt to trade inflation for jobs is just an illusion, and eventually you'll just end up with higher inflation and the same level of unemployment.
So after all that, who's right? Which side wins the debate? Well, you know what? Most economists today would tell you that's kind of the wrong question to be asking. It's not really about picking a team anymore. It's more like a balancing act.
Yeah, the modern consensus is that both of these perspectives have real value. It's about using the right tool for the right job. You can think of the Keynesian model as your emergency room toolkit. It's fantastic for explaining why a crisis is happening and for that immediate short-term response. But the neoclassical model, that's more like your long-term health plan. It's much better for understanding the fundamental drivers of economic growth and prosperity over decades. And hey, don't just take my word for it. Robert Solow, a Nobel laureate in economics, put it perfectly. He basically said, look, in the short term, when you're in the thick of it, the Keynesian way of thinking is a pretty good guide. But when you're asking those big long-term questions, where is the economy headed over the next 20 or 30 years, that's when you really need the neoclassical framework. It's about combining the two.
And this isn't just academic. We literally just saw this whole debate play out in real time, didn't we? First with the massive kind of Keynesian-style government spending during the pandemic, and then that was followed by these fierce, more neoclassical-sounding arguments about how to rein in inflation. So the big question is always right there, waiting for us. When the next crisis hits, and there will be a next one, which playbook will we reach for? It's a huge question, and the answer is going to shape not just the economy, but all of our financial futures.